Hello, this is Bible Academy for Children. I'm Pastor Teacher Curtis Omo, and today we'll continue in our series, The Life of David, and 2 Samuel chapter 17, verse 1. Now, before we begin, let's make sure that we have confessed our known sins. At the same time, we're allowing His Spirit to control us. Let's pray. Well, Heavenly Father, we thank you again for this opportunity and the privilege and all that you've provided so we can study your word. Lord, we ask that you'll open our hearts now and our minds to your truth. In Jesus' name, amen. I like to remind people now and then that it's important to make sure that you are familiar with the basic series. The basic series is a few lessons that show us how God opens His Word up to our hearts. That's just one aspect of it. It shows you how we're supposed to walk in the Spirit, to confess our sins, so we can grow spiritually. And these things have to be done correctly in order to please God and see Him do those things in our lives. Now, it's important. I cannot overemphasize that. If you have not studied the basics, you need to go back to the basics and get that down. It would be a shame for you not to realize what it really means to be utilizing the Spirit correctly or walking in the Spirit, or the need to confess your sins. And those are all essential activities of a growing Christian that we should be doing regularly. Confessing our sins, walking in the Spirit, being controlled with the Spirit, and related matters. Basics covers those. Well, we are in 2 Samuel chapter 17. We continue to work through the historical narrative. Now, I say this because this is basically a story, but it's a true story and it's history. When we last left off, David was at the ford of the wilderness. That means he's about to go into the wilderness. He's right there sort of at the entrance by the Jordan River. Let me show you a map here for a moment, one I haven't showed you before. This is another one of those topographical maps that shows you the terrain, the level. It doesn't show you the detail of the level, but it does give you kind of a picture of what the land is like. So David is right down here in this area, probably at a shallow spot, just so he can cross the Jordan if he needs to. Now he's going to go up to this place called Mahanaim. All right, and you can get an idea what it's like. It's kind of like flying over an airplane with nothing down there except land and water, huh? So this is where we're headed with David here in a few moments. He's at this ford with a bunch of people with him. As I continue to study, I'm beginning to realize he had thousands and thousands of people with him when he moved out of Jerusalem, and perhaps some joined up with him as he's on his way to get out of the area when Absalom is moving into Jerusalem. Hushai, David's spy advisor, is among Absalom's advisors now, and he and Ahithophel both are being consulted by Absalom whenever he calls. Chapter 17, verse 1, we begin to look for the first time at Hushai's counsel. Remember, this is a friend of David, and he is out to what they call thwart, to basically make Ahithophel's counsel useless, because he was a very good counselor. So he's basically going to cancel it the best he can, neutralize it, we might say. So here we go. Ahithophel said to Absalom, now remember, he's the other counselor. He's the bad one, you might say. Let me choose 12,000 men, and I will arise and pursue David tonight. Well, now that they've settled in Jerusalem, Ahithophel advises Absalom, it's time to go after David. Let me get 12,000 men and pursue David tonight. He wanted to get started doing it right now. There's a reason for that. He wants to get David before he gets further away or gets settled in or anything like that. His reasoning is, verse 2, "And I will come upon him while he was exhausted and worn out, and throw him into a panic, and all the people who are with him will flee. I will strike down only the king." So here's his plan. We're going to swoop down on top of David with our 12,000 men. His men are going to panic, and they will run, and then we'll just kill David. That sounds like a pretty simple plan, except it really sounds difficult. They would have to assume a lot of things. Why isn't David fleeing? Is David going to be there? Would they flee? Remember, these are some of David's top soldiers are expecting to flee. Well, that's a good idea to hit them when they're tired, when they're worn down. The word also means discouraged. And to just kill David's a good idea, too, if you can do that. And that way the other people would probably more likely come back into the rule of Absalom. Of course, if they hadn't been killed, or their relatives, or their friends. So that's not a really bad strategy at all, if he can pull it off. Here's the rest of his plan in verse 3, and he says, "And I will bring all the people back to you, like the return of everyone depends upon the man you seek. Then all the people will be at peace." In other words, he's going to go all out to bring everybody back he can except for David. And that way, if just David's killed, then it's more likely they can have peace back in the land without all this division among the people over the rulers. Well, verse 4, "So the plan was pleasing in the sight of Absalom and the eyes of the elders of Israel." Now, the elders of Israel would be the leaders of the tribes that be represented there, and they'd be giving approval or disapproval of this plan, and they're approving of this plan. They think it's a good idea. However, Absalom has another advisor, Hushai, David's spy. Then Absalom said, "Now call Hushai the Archite also, and let us hear what he has to say." When Hushai had come to Absalom, Absalom said to him, "Ahithophel has spoken this advice." In other words, just what we just read. "Should we follow his advice? If not, you speak." So after Absalom tells Hushai the advice of Ahithophel, he tells Hushai to speak up if it's not any good. Now notice how Hushai did not push himself out in front to talk to Absalom. He waited till he was called. He could have given himself away if it's too pushy to cancel out Ahithophel's advice. So he waits till he's called. Good idea. Now remember, Ahithophel's advice was viewed as so wise it was compared to the Word of God. He seemed to always be right. Well, Absalom's not convinced, though, that it's foolproof. So he's going to go to Hushai this time and see what he says. Verse 7, Hushai speaks. So Hushai said to Absalom, "This time the advice that Ahithophel has advised is not good." Notice, the first thing that Hushai does is tell Absalom that Ahithophel's advice is no good. Now remember, his plan is to thwart it, to make it look bad or cancel it out. And he begins by getting this idea into Absalom's head that Ahithophel's advice has a flaw. It's got some problems. Now, this plan that Ahithophel has is a lot more complicated than it sounds. It's not simple like he'd given advice for Absalom earlier to take David's concubines on the roof and display himself with them. This time he's got to deal with David and his warriors. Verse 8. Moreover, now remember, Hushai is continuing to talk. "You know your father and his men, that they are mighty men, and they are fierce, like a bear robbed of her cubs in the field. and your father is an expert in warfare, and will not spend the night with the people. Hushai brings up several things here, things that he thinks is going to work in canceling out Ahithophel's advice. First, he's already said that his advice is no good. Now, here's why. Now, this is what we call psychological warfare. He's going to work on the mind of Absalom, as well as the leaders that are listening to this. So the first thing that Hushai does, he builds up David. He's the great warrior with warrior skills. And by the way, we have no record yet of David losing one battle. So he's going to have his men go up against David and some of his best warriors. So Hushai is raising this question about maybe that's not such a good idea to do it Ahithophel's way. David doesn't lose battles, and he's also an expert at military strategy, how to move troops in the field. Plus, he won't be with his people. He'll say some other things about David in a moment. We'll see it, but he won't be there with them. This is what he's going to claim. So he's probably got Absalom a little nervous about Ahithophel's plan. Did Ahithophel bring up some of these things about David? No. And yet Ahithophel had worked with David also. So Hushai is saying, you're not going to catch David by surprise. And you're not going to panic his soldiers. His soldiers are hardcore, veteran, fierce warriors. They're not going to crack up and run. So Ahithophel's plan, according to Hushai, has some problems with it. Then he brings up the point that at the end of this verse, and your father is an expert in warfare, and he will not spend the night with his people. So you don't even know where he is. You're going to panic his people, but how's that going to help when you don't even know where David is to kill him? Verse 9, Hushai continues, look, he has now hidden himself in one of the caves or another place. Now, Hushai was convinced of this. He knew David. He didn't stay out in the open. And a lot of that's true. He liked to hide, just in case someone does want to ambush you or sneak up on you. If they can't find you, they can't do that. But here's what else he says. Now look at this. As soon as some of the troops fall at the first attack, whoever hears it will say, there has been a slaughter among the people who follow Absalom. So what's this all about? First of all, again, David's not going to be at the troops. He's not going to be out in the open, probably in a cave somewhere, or somewhere maybe deep in the forest. Then Hushai predicts what's going to happen. As soon as your soldiers contact David's soldiers and they start to fall, they're going to start yelling, Absalom's men are being slaughtered. Now, how could he say that? Because that's what David did to his enemy. And remember, these are Israeli soldiers. These are soldiers of the nation of Israel. These are soldiers that David had led, and they had probably fought with David many times. So they know David. And they know the panic David's armies have put in other people. And now David's going to be against them. So this is really getting Absalom and the leaders of Israel thinking, we better not go with Ahithophel's plan. Because as soon as our soldiers start to fall, they're the one that's going to start yelling, let's get out of here. Verse 10. Listen to what else Hushai says. And even the one who is valiant, that would be the soldier who is one of your bravest, proven in battle, whose heart is like the heart of a lion, will completely melt away. It's like he'll faint. For all Israel knows, now listen to this, that your father, talking to Absalom about his father David, is a mighty man, and those who are with him are brave men. So even Absalom's bravest of men are going to faint away because they know who they are up against. David and some of the most fierce warriors in the world. That fact cannot be ignored. David and some of the most fierce warriors in the world who don't lose. He's not going to let Absalom forget that. Well, now that Hushai has picked apart Ahithophel's plan, he's going to give his plan now. Listen to what he says. But I advise, now this is Hushai talking to Absalom and the elders, but I advise that all Israel be surely gathered to you, from Dan even to Beersheba, in number like the sand by the sea, be gathered to you, and you personally go into battle. Several things Hushai says. First of all, you've got to get every able-bodied man in all Israel. Dan is the far tribe up north. Beersheba is a city down south of Israel. So all of Israel needs to bring in their troops. So they'll be numbering like the sand of the sea. That's by the seashore. So that's like, you can't even number so many. So we're probably talking 100,000 troops. Okay? And then he says, Absalom, at the end of the verse, and you personally go into battle. You're to lead them, Absalom. Now, is Absalom a proven warrior? We don't know. Maybe he's never done it. But just to be there with all those troops would be a good thing. This is what Hushai is saying. So Hushai is saying, we're going to get all the troops and we're just going to overwhelm David. This is going to be an enormous army. It's compared to the sand of the seashore. Have you ever tried to count the sands on the seashore? Millions and billions, aren't there? But this is just a comparison. So it's so many troops you can't number them. That's what he's trying to say. Get everybody out there. And that Absalom should be the leader. How could he lose, even against David and his men, with that many Israelites behind you, Absalom? His plan continues. So we shall come against him, that's David, in one of the places where he can be found, and we will descend on him as the dew falls on the ground. Neither he nor any of his men will be left alive. So what he's saying is, we'll just sweep over the entire area, and we'll find him. And we'll fall on him and his men like dew falls on the ground. You know, when you get up in the morning, you see the grass wet outside. That's the dew on the ground. Well, that's what they're going to do with David's army. They're going to sweep down on them and fall all over them. No one and nothing will be missed. Not one man will be left alive. So Hushai is predicting the outcome of the battle, and that's got to be sounding good to Absalom and the Israelite leaders. No one's going to survive. All those rebellious people will be gone. Not all those people who were with David will be gone too. And then Hushai uses this rather strange, you might say, exaggeration. But you got to remember, he's getting them built up emotionally, getting them excited. Listen to what he says. If he withdraws into a city, that is, if David withdraws into a city, then all Israel shall bring ropes to that city. What? And we will drag it into the valley until not even a small stone is found there. So you can just picture this in your mind. Everyone's bringing ropes, so they start throwing it around the top of the fortress there and start pulling with thousands of men pulling, and the whole city topples, and it's like they drag him away. Now, this, of course, is an exaggeration. The fancy English term is hyperbole. So they can get a picture in their mind of what it's going to be like in defeating David and his army. We're going to take them all down. Just like we're going to go up and tear down whatever city they're in and destroy it too. Not one stone will be left where it's supposed to be. There's no way in the world we're going to lose against David. So that's what I mean by the psychological warfare. He's getting them to think that way. First of all, you can't mess with David, so you get everybody to go. so they can be convinced that David will be defeated. How could they possibly lose? Then Absalom and all the men said, the counsel of Hushai the Archite is better than the counsel of Ahithophel. For the Lord has ordained to thwart the good counsel of Ahithophel, so that the Lord might bring calamity on Absalom. Now, let me examine this one verse a little closer. This verse is in two parts. You have the first part that begins at the beginning of the verse and goes to where you see the quote mark on the third line over to the left where it says Ahithophel. So this is a quote. The counsel of Hushai the Archite is better than the counsel of Ahithophel. This is what Absalom has concluded. We're going to go with Hushai. Then the second part of this verse is a comment by the one who wrote this. This would be the narrator or the author of 2 Samuel. And he's commenting about what's going to happen. He explains, for the Lord had ordained, that means decided, to thwart the good counsel of Ahithophel, so that the Lord might bring calamity on Absalom. So the narrator is telling us the Lord is working in this to thwart whatever Ahithophel said, so Absalom can lose. You get that? So you got these two parts. One's the response by Absalom. The second part is the explanation of what's going to happen by the author. That Ahithophel, his counsel, is thwarted because that's what the Lord wanted. So the Lord used Hushai's advice to counter Ahithophel's. Now another thing. Remember, Ahithophel wanted to quickly get the troops in there and attack David at night before they got settled in or got in defense positions. He wanted a quick strike and then just kill David. Hushai's plan is going to take some time. It's going to take some time to get word out to the troops all over Israel and then travel to join up with the group. So we're probably talking maybe a week before they're ready to attack. But in the meantime, David's going to get word what Absalom's plan is from Hushai himself indirectly. So this gives time to get word to David so he can get ready for Absalom and his army. And that makes a big difference. Let me tell you a couple of reasons why. Because if Absalom knows he's coming and how many is coming, he can choose where they're going to fight. So he won't allow his army to be swarmed. He'll fix it so he can defeat them. Maybe only face a few thousand at a time, not all at once. Okay? So keep that in mind. David has time to get his troops ready and pick the battleground. But Hushai's got to get word to David. And that's the next part of our story. Then Hushai said to Zadok and Abiathar the priest, this is what Ahithophel counseled Absalom and the elders of Israel, and this is what I have counseled. Now remember, Hushai is a spy, right? And David has already arranged with the priesthood to use them to get a message to David. Zadok and Abiathar are the priests, and their sons are the messengers, or we might call them the couriers. The couriers are going to carry what Hushai wants David to know. It says here, they're going to pass on the word of what Ahithophel said and then what Hushai said. You see the message? This is what Ahithophel counseled Absalom and the elders of Israel, and this is what I have counseled. So David knows what's coming, because Hushai is telling him through the priesthood. So the priesthood is the underground communication network to get a message to David. Here's what they're to say. Verse 16, now therefore, send quickly and tell David, saying, do not spend the night at the fords of the wilderness. In other words, don't spend another night there, but be sure you cross over, or else the king and all the people who are with him will be destroyed. You get it? Cross over tonight, so you won't get caught by the king and all his troops, or you're going to get destroyed. So David gets the word. He's got to get everyone across the river. Now, that's the message. But Hushai's got to get the message to David. What's he going to do? He's going to use the priesthood. He's going to use their two sons. It's the son of each one of the priests. One's name is Jonathan. Remember their names? We saw them earlier. And Ahimaaz. They were staying in a place at En Rogel. Now, I don't have that on the map, but it's just outside Jerusalem. So they're in a little location outside of Jerusalem. They're not going in and out of Jerusalem. But the priests use a maidservant, a female servant, and she's their messenger to these two sons who will take the message on to David. All right? Now let's read verse 17. Now Jonathan and Ahimaaz were staying at En Rogel. That's about a mile outside of Jerusalem. And a maidservant would go and tell them. And they would go and tell King David. For they could not be seen entering the city. You didn't want the priesthood sons going in and out of the city. Someone would say, what are they doing that for? So Jonathan and Ahimaaz, sons of the priests, were the two couriers. Verse 18. But a young man saw them and told Absalom. So the two of them departed quickly and came to the house of a man in Bahurim, who had a well in his courtyard, and they went down there. Now, what this is telling us is the two couriers were spotted. So they get out of there real quick and go to this town right here. See it on the map again? Bahurim. They go into a house. They go to the courtyard where they have a well. They go down into the well. What happens next? And the woman took a covering and spread it over the well's opening and scattered grain on it so that nothing was known. Now, what we don't sometimes know about these wells is that often we see, pictures of ancient wells, and they're kind of built up like this above the ground, right? And they have maybe some rocks here or something, and here's the ground here. Well, some of the wells would basically be even with the ground, okay? And they may have a few stones around it to mark it out like this, but it was even with the ground. So if I was to put the ground here and put the well here, you probably wouldn't even see it, see? All right, because it goes down here into the ground, right? So she throws a cover on it, all right? Throw some grain on it. Makes it look like there's nothing there. Pretty smart, huh? So, it says, so that nothing was known. So they are down in this well, hidden. Verse 20. Then Absalom's servants, that would be his soldiers, came to the woman at the house and said, where are Ahimaaz and Jonathan? And the woman said to them, they have crossed the stream of water. And when they searched and could not find them, they returned to Jerusalem. So when they asked her where the two couriers are, she told them they've already crossed the stream. She told them they went that way, which was not the right direction, right? Because they're down in that well. So she deceived them. Remember, she's working with spies. She's on the good guy's side, so that's okay to do that. And the soldiers gave up looking and went back to Jerusalem. Verse 21, it came about after they had departed, that is the troops of Absalom, that they came up out of the well and went and told King David. And they said to King David, "Arise and cross over the water quickly, for thus Ahithophel has counseled against you." So what David does, he takes his men and he quickly is going to cross over the Jordan River. All right? He's going to head up here towards Mahanaim. So David got the message and he put his people on the road right away. We got to get out of here. Absalom and his men will be here soon. So, verse 22. Then David and all the people who were with him arose and crossed the Jordan River. By the light of the morning, not one was left who had not crossed the Jordan. So what this tells us is David has a lot more people with him than I thought earlier. We weren't ever told how many he had, except he had 3 groups of soldiers plus the people with him in Jerusalem. But now we're probably numbering in the thousands, several thousand, perhaps 5, 6, 7,000 people were with David. And they were what we call loyalists. They were loyal to David. The next part of our story comes back to Ahithophel. So here's where we leave it. Absalom and his men are gathering to go after David. David and his people have crossed the Jordan River on their way up to Mahanaim. Verse 23. Now when Ahithophel saw that his counsel was not followed, he saddled his donkey and arose and went to his home, to his city, and set his house in order. He got all the arrangements made because he's going to die. He set his house in order and hanged himself. Thus he died and was buried in the grave of his father. Just like that, Ahithophel is dead and out of the picture. Why did he do this? Well, he probably knew that since they didn't take his advice, David would outwit Absalom and his army, and most likely win, and come back and perhaps have Ahithophel executed. So Ahithophel figured, I might as well put it into my life right now. Really kind of silly when you think about it. You don't know what David was going to do. But he had also been perhaps felt really bad because they didn't take his advice. I mean, what good is he now? Yet his advice was actually pretty good. But we'll never find out if it had worked. When he set his house in order, he probably wrote up a will and testament. You've heard of that. And then he strangled or hung himself. The Hebrew word basically means he strung himself up somehow. So in less than a chapter, he goes from being the brilliant advisor to now a loser. And his advice is rejected, and he commits suicide. Does that remind you of somebody? Someone else who betrayed an anointed king? Some 1,000 years later in Jerusalem and hung himself? Judah Iscariot, of course. Well, Ahithophel's out of the picture. His advice was rejected. That answers the prayer that David had. Remember, as soon as he heard Ahithophel's going to be given advice, his advice has been thwarted. God's plan overrules. God uses Hushai to cancel out the advice of Ahithophel. And then Ahithophel, well, he sort of cancels himself out, doesn't he? So David's on the road. Back to David, verse 24. Then David came to Mahanaim, and Absalom crossed the Jordan, and he and all the men of Israel with him. So here we are, back to our map. David is on up in Mahanaim. I think that's about 7 miles from the river. And Absalom is down here with all his troops crossing, heading towards David. Now let's look at this map a little closer. Notice this word right here says Gilead. That's what we call a region area. Let me show you another map here. Gad was the tribe name that held this area. All right, see Gad right here? The overall area here is Gilead. It's huge. So it would encompass much of Gad, maybe most of it. At the same time, it had been encompassing or all around the town of Monahan right here. It's kind of small, I know it. But this is where it is. All right? So, when we go back to another map, the one that had the land on it, you can see the title here, Gad. Here's the title, Gilead, up here at an angle. Okay. Here's Mahanaim. So David's here at this city. May have been right here. See where the line goes down from the round orange dot? Right down here about where it's flashing. Absalom's troops, there's so many of them, they're going to be all around this area. Remember, there's thousands of them. In the meantime, Absalom's got a little problem with command. He hasn't got a general. Remember, Joab went with David. Verse 25. Absalom sets Amasa over the army in place of Joab. Now Amasa was the son of a man whose name was Ithra, the Israelite, who went into Abigail, the daughter of Nahash, sister of Zeruiah, Joab's mother. Now all these names and numbers here, so to speak, tell us who this man was. He replaced Joab, so he must have been a military man. He was the son of a man, and that man's name, his father's name, was Ithra the Israelite. Now some of your translations will say Jether, the Ishmaelite. Same person. 1 Chronicles 2:17. Same person, where you call him Ithra or Jether. They're just different spellings, I think. But it is the same person, okay? Well, all these names and relatives here, they tell us that he is related to both David and Joab. So he's a relative. Of course, all Jews are relatives, but these are a little closer. All right. Verse 26. And Israel and Absalom camped in the land of Gilead. So now we have Absalom and his armies in the same area as David. How ominous that must have been to have tens of thousands of troops surrounding, saturating the entire area. In the meantime, David's in Mahanaim. It goes back and tells us what happens when he arrived there. Listen to this. Now when David had come to Mahanaim, Shobi, the son of Nahash from Rabbah of the sons of Ammon, Machir, the son of Amiel from Lo-debar, and Barzillai, you like that name, the Gileadite from Rogelim. So this just tells us these three groups of people, these three men, are going to supply David and his people. We don't know much about him. Shobi just says he's the sons of Ammon, so he's an Ammonite. Machir, we've actually heard of him. This is where Mephibosheth was staying when David had him notified to come in, and he's going to bless him with Saul's property. So we've heard of him before. That's back in chapter 9, verses 5 and 6. So Shobi's an Ammonite. Machir, he had helped Mephibosheth. And then Barzillai, well, we don't know anything about him other than what we have right here. He's a Gileadite from Rogelim. Well, they brought a whole bunch of stuff. And 28 and 29 is a list of that stuff. Look at this. They brought beds, it's probably bedding, basins, vessels of pottery, wheat, barley, flour, roasted grain. Sometimes you'll see that called parched grain. Beans, lentils, roasted seeds, same way, parched seeds. So they had all this food. Continue verse 29, honey and curds. I always think of cottage cheese when I hear curds. And sheep and cheese from the herd. That'd be like from the herd of cattle. For David and the people with him to eat. For they said, the people are hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness. So all these people bring this huge amount of food and supplies to David and his people, his army. So they're well supplied, and they have a short time to recover and rest and get ready to do battle with Absalom when the time comes. And that time's coming real soon as we continue our story next time. Let's pray. Well, Heavenly Father, we thank you again for your word today. It's been an interesting one to see this history and how you work in the lives of your people, how you used Hushai, how you used the woman to cover the two couriers as they were escaping to get to David, and how you thwarted and answered a prayer, the message of Ahithophel, because you have a plan for David and his people, and they are to win. And we look forward to seeing your word on that next time. Thank you for these things. In Jesus' name, amen.